James sat in his office on the 40th floor, looking out at the city that had made him rich beyond his wildest dreams. At 45, he owned 3 companies, had houses in 4 countries, and more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. People called him a genius, a visionary, a self-made billionaire who had started with nothing and built an empire. But they didn't know the whole truth. Every morning when James looked in the mirror, he saw the same face that had stared back at him 26 years ago. Back then, he was just 19 years old, working 2 jobs and sleeping on his friend's couch. He had holes in his shoes and ate ramen noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 17, leaving him with nothing but their debts and a burning desire to make something of himself. That's when he met Rebecca. She was beautiful, smart, and came from a wealthy family on the other side of town. James was working as a waiter at an upscale restaurant where Rebecca's family often dined. She noticed him right away, not because of his looks, but because of how hard he worked. While other waiters chatted with each other, James was always moving, always helping, always trying to make everyone's evening perfect. They started talking during his breaks. Rebecca would come early for dinner just to spend a few minutes with him before her parents arrived. She told him about her dreams of becoming a teacher. He shared his plans of starting his own business someday, even though he had no idea how he would ever get the money to do it. For 6 months, they met in secret. Rebecca's parents would never approve of her dating a poor boy with no family connections. But young love doesn't care about social differences. They found ways to be together, meeting at parks, walking through quiet neighborhoods, talking for hours about their futures. Then Rebecca got pregnant. James remembered the day she told him like it was yesterday. They were sitting by the lake where they often met. Rebecca was crying, not because she was unhappy, but because she was scared. Her parents would disown her if they found out. James's world felt like it was falling apart, but he held her hand and promised they would figure it out together. For weeks, they talked about what to do. James suggested they get married right away. He would drop out of college, work more hours, do whatever it took to support their family. But Rebecca's parents found out about the pregnancy before they could make any decisions. The confrontation was brutal. Rebecca's father threatened to call the police and have James arrested for corrupting his daughter. Her mother called him every terrible name she could think of. They gave Rebecca an ultimatum: give up the baby for adoption and never see James again, or be cut off completely from the family with no money and no support. James tried to fight for Rebecca and their unborn child. He begged her parents to give him a chance. He promised he would work day and night to provide for their family. But Rebecca's father just laughed at him. What could a poor boy with no education and no family possibly offer their daughter and grandchild? The pressure was too much for Rebecca. She was only 18, scared, and had never lived without her family's support. After many tearful conversations, she made the decision that would haunt James for the rest of his life. She would give their baby up for adoption to a family that could provide everything they couldn't. James held Rebecca's hand during the birth. For one precious hour he held his son. The baby had the tiniest fingers and the softest skin. When the little boy opened his eyes, James saw his own father looking back at him. There was a small butterfly-shaped birthmark on the baby's left wrist that looked exactly like one James's grandfather had. Then the adoption agency took his son away, and James never saw him again. Rebecca's parents made sure of that. They sent her to live with relatives in another state immediately after the birth. James tried to contact her, but her family had changed her phone number and refused to give him any information. It was as if she and their son had vanished from the earth. The pain of losing his child and the woman he loved nearly destroyed James. For months, he barely ate or slept. His grades suffered, and he almost dropped out of college completely. But slowly the pain transformed into something else: determination. James threw himself into his studies and work with an intensity that scared his friends. He studied computer programming 18 hours a day. He took every extra shift he could get. He saved every penny, eating the cheapest food and wearing the same clothes until they fell apart. His professors noticed his dedication and helped him apply for scholarships. By his senior year, James had developed a software program that caught the attention of several tech companies. Instead of selling it, he used his small savings to start his own company. The first few years were brutal. James worked from a tiny apartment that served as both his home and office. He slept on the floor next to his computers. Many nights he would lie awake thinking about his son, wondering where he was, if he was happy, if he had parents who loved him. But James never gave up. Every time he wanted to quit, he thought about the child he had lost. Maybe if he became successful enough, wealthy enough, he could find his son someday. Maybe he could prove to Rebecca's family that he was worthy of their daughter and grandchild. The business grew slowly at first, then faster as James's software became popular with small companies. He reinvested every dollar back into the company, hiring more programmers, developing new products. He worked 7 days a week, taking no vacations, making no time for relationships or friendships. By the time James was 30, his company had made him a millionaire. By 35, he was worth $50 million. But the success felt empty without someone to share it with. That's when he met Lisa at a charity event. She was kind, intelligent, and didn't seem impressed by his wealth. They talked for hours about books, travel, and their dreams for the future. James found himself falling in love again, something he thought would never happen. He told Lisa almost everything about his life, but he couldn't bring himself to mention Rebecca or their son. The pain was still too raw, too personal. He convinced himself that his past was buried and should stay that way. James and Lisa married 2 years later. They had a beautiful daughter named Maya, who became the light of James's life. When he held Maya for the first time, memories of holding his son came flooding back. But he pushed those thoughts away, focusing on being the best father he could be to the child he was allowed to keep. Now, sitting in his office overlooking the city he had conquered, James was worth over $2 billion. He had everything most people could ever want: a loving wife, a beautiful daughter, homes around the world, and respect from his peers. But late at night, when the house was quiet and his family was sleeping, James would sometimes find himself standing by Maya's bedroom door watching her sleep. And he would think about another child, now 26 years old, who might have his eyes or his grandfather's birthmark. James had built his empire on a foundation of success, but underneath it all was a secret that had shaped every decision he had ever made. Somewhere out there was his son, the boy he had given up but never forgotten, the child who had motivated him to become the man he was today. He just never imagined that fate would bring them together in the most unexpected way possible. 3 months later, James found himself standing in the lobby of Children's Hospital, wearing his best suit and feeling completely out of place. His company was donating $5 million to build a new cancer treatment wing, and the hospital had insisted on a big ceremony with photos and speeches. James hated these public events, but Lisa had convinced him it was important for their daughter Maya to see her father helping others. 6-year-old Maya stood beside him, clutching his hand and staring wide-eyed at all the balloons and decorations. "Daddy, why are all these kids here sick?" Maya whispered, tugging on his jacket. James knelt down to her level. "Sometimes people get sick, sweetheart, but the doctors and nurses here work very hard to make them feel better." The hospital director, a cheerful woman named Dr. Johnson, led them through the halls for a tour before the ceremony. They walked past rooms filled with children of all ages, some playing games, others sleeping, many with their families by their sides. James had written plenty of checks to charities over the years, but he had never actually visited the places his money went. Seeing these brave children fighting for their lives made his business problems seem very small. Maya seemed fascinated by everything, asking endless questions about the machines and decorations. "Mr. James," Dr. Johnson said, "I'd love to show you our reading room. We have a wonderful volunteer program where people come in to read stories to the children. It's one of our most popular activities." They turned a corner and walked into a bright, colorful room filled with bookshelves, soft chairs, and beanbags scattered across the floor. About 15 children were sitting in a circle, completely focused on a young man sitting cross-legged in the center, holding a picture book. The volunteer was reading Where the Wild Things Are, with such enthusiasm that he was making different voices for each character. The children were giggling and gasping at all the right moments. Even Maya stopped walking and stood mesmerized by the performance. James found himself staring at the young man, probably in his mid-20s with dark hair and kind eyes. There was something familiar about him, something that made James's chest feel tight. The way he smiled, the shape of his hands, even how he tilted his head when he was thinking. It all reminded James of someone, but he couldn't place who. And Max sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, the volunteer read, closing the book with a flourish. The children clapped and cheered, begging for another story. The young man laughed and promised to read more next week. As the children were led back to their rooms by nurses, he began tidying up the books and putting the chairs back in place. Alex is one of our best volunteers, Dr. Johnson explained. He's been coming here for 2 years, 3 times a week. The children absolutely adore him. Maya had wandered over to where Alex was organizing books. I liked your voices, she said shyly. You made the monsters sound funny instead of scary. Alex smiled at her and James felt his heart skip a beat. That smile was exactly like the one he remembered seeing on his own father's face in old photographs. Thank you, Alex said to Maya. What's your favorite book? I like stories about dragons and princesses, Maya replied, her shyness already disappearing. Oh, I know some great dragon stories. Maybe your dad can bring you back sometime and I'll read one to you. James stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm James, thank you for what you do here. The children obviously love you. Alex shook his hand firmly. Alex Thompson, it's nice to meet you. Dr. Johnson told me about your donation. Thank you for caring about these kids. Up close, James could see that Alex had the same green eyes that James saw in the mirror every morning, the same strong jawline that James's father had. But it was more than just physical features. There was something about Alex's presence that felt familiar, like meeting someone you had known in a dream. Have we met before? James asked, unable to stop himself. Alex thought for a moment. I don't think so. I'd remember meeting someone who's helping the hospital so much. Are you from around here? I grew up about 20 minutes from here, James said. Where are you from originally? That's a complicated question, Alex said with a small laugh. I was adopted as a baby, so I'm not really sure where I'm from originally. I grew up in the foster care system here in the city, though. James felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Foster care? Yeah, my adoptive parents were wonderful, but they died in a car accident when I was 12. After that, I bounced around different homes until I aged out of the system at 18. The room seemed to spin around James. A 26-year-old man, adopted as a baby, who had lost his parents and grown up in foster care. The timeline matched perfectly with when James had given up his son. Daddy, are you okay? Maya asked, looking up at him with concern. James realized he had been staring at Alex for too long. Yes, sweetheart. I'm fine. Alex knelt down to Maya's level. Your dad seems like a really good person. You're lucky to have him. He works a lot, Maya said matter-of-factly. But he always reads me bedtime stories, just like you do for the sick kids. That's what dads are supposed to do, Alex said gently. Take care of the people they love. James watched this interaction with growing amazement. Alex was so natural with children, so patient and kind. Even Maya, who was usually shy around strangers, was chatting with him like they had known each other for years. Alex, Dr. Johnson called from across the room. Could you help us set up for the ceremony? Of course, Alex said, standing up. He looked at James and Maya. It was really nice meeting both of you. I hope I see you again soon. As Alex walked away, James found himself memorizing every detail about him. The way he moved with quiet confidence, how he had immediately connected with Maya, the genuine warmth in his voice when he talked about the children. During the donation ceremony, James could barely focus on the speeches and photo opportunities. His eyes kept drifting to Alex, who was helping set up chairs and making sure the children who attended were comfortable. James noticed that Alex didn't just work with the kids, he seemed to know each one personally. He knew which children were having good days and which ones were struggling. He brought extra juice boxes for the ones who looked tired and had quiet conversations with the ones who seemed scared. He's special, isn't he? Dr. Johnson said, noticing James watching Alex. What's his story? James asked, trying to sound casual. Alex is a registered nurse, but he volunteers here on his days off. He started coming after he finished nursing school. Said he wanted to give back because some volunteers helped him when he was young and in the hospital system. He was in the hospital a lot as a child, not as a patient. He lived in a group home that was connected to a children's hospital. Volunteers would come read to the kids there, and Alex said those people made some of his darkest days brighter. Now he wants to do the same for others. James felt a wave of emotion wash over him. If this young man was his son, and every instinct was telling him that he was, then James had missed watching him grow up into this incredible person. He had missed seeing Alex overcome tremendous challenges and choose to dedicate his life to helping others. After the ceremony, James lingered, hoping to talk to Alex again. But Alex had already left to go to his regular job at the hospital across town. That night, James lay awake thinking about green eyes, a familiar smile, and a young man whose kindness had touched his heart in a way he couldn't explain. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that he was seeing connections that weren't there. But deep in his heart, James knew he had found something he had been searching for his entire life, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. James couldn't stop thinking about Alex. For 3 days after the hospital visit, he found himself distracted during important business meetings, staring out the window and replaying every moment of their conversation. The way Alex had smiled at Maya, the kindness in his voice, those familiar green eyes. It all haunted James in the most beautiful way. On Thursday morning, Maya came down to breakfast with a picture she had drawn during art class. It showed stick figures of herself and Alex reading a book together, with bright red hearts floating above their heads. "Look, Daddy, I drew Alex reading me a dragon story," Maya announced proudly, holding up her artwork. Lisa looked at the drawing with curiosity. "Who's Alex, sweetie?" "He's the nice man who reads stories to sick kids at the hospital. He promised to read me a dragon story next time we visit." James felt his heart race. Did he really promise that?
"Yes, can we go back soon, Daddy?"
"I want to hear the dragon story." James looked at Lisa, who was smiling at Maya's enthusiasm. "I think that could be arranged," he said carefully. "Maybe we could volunteer there regularly, help with their reading program." That afternoon, James called Dr. Johnson and offered to sponsor the hospital's entire volunteer reading program. He suggested expanding it to include more volunteers, more books, and maybe even some special events for the children. "That's incredibly generous, James," Dr. Johnson said. "Alex will be thrilled. He's been hoping we could do more storytelling activities. Would you like to come in next week to discuss the details?" "Absolutely," James replied, perhaps a little too quickly. And maybe Maya could come along. She really enjoyed meeting Alex. The following Tuesday, James and Maya returned to the hospital. Maya had insisted on bringing her favorite book about a princess who befriends a dragon, hoping Alex might read it to the other children. They found Alex in the reading room, sitting with a boy who looked about 8 years old. The child was completely bald from chemotherapy treatments and looked very tired, but Alex was patiently helping him write in a journal. "That's a great story, Tommy," Alex was saying. "Tell me more about your superhero. What's his special power?" "He can make people feel better just by hugging them," the boy whispered. "That's the best superpower ever," Alex replied seriously. "The world needs more superheroes like that." Maya walked over quietly and sat down next to them. "I like superhero stories too," she said softly. Tommy looked at Maya shyly. "Are you sick like me?" "No," Maya said. "But my daddy brought me here to meet Alex. He reads the best stories." James watched from across the room as Alex effortlessly included Maya in the conversation with Tommy. Within minutes, the three of them were collaborating on Tommy's superhero story, with Maya suggesting that the superhero should have a dragon friend, and Alex drawing pictures to illustrate their ideas. When Dr. Johnson arrived to discuss the expanded reading program, James found it hard to concentrate on the business details. He kept glancing over at Alex, noticing new things each time. The way Alex unconsciously touched his nose when he was thinking, exactly the same habit James had. How Alex's laugh started as a quiet chuckle and then became this full, joyful sound that reminded James of his own father. "Alex has a gift with children," Dr. Johnson was saying. "He seems to understand exactly what they need, whether it's distraction from their treatments or just someone to listen to their fears." "Has he always wanted to work with kids?" James asked. Actually, he originally planned to work in emergency medicine. But during his nursing training, he did a rotation in pediatrics and fell in love with it. He says kids are more honest than adults. They don't pretend to be brave when they're scared, and they don't hold back their joy when something makes them happy. James found himself nodding. That sounded exactly like something he would have said at that age. Over the next few weeks, James found more and more reasons to visit the hospital. He brought supplies for the reading room, organized a book drive through his company, and even arranged for some famous children's book authors to visit. Each time Maya begged to come along, and each time James found himself studying Alex more closely. The resemblances were becoming impossible to ignore. Alex had the same cowlick on the left side of his head that James had fought with his entire life. When Alex concentrated on something, he bit his lower lip in the exact same way James did when he was working on a difficult problem. Most remarkably, Alex had the same habit of running his fingers through his hair when he was nervous, a gesture James recognized because Lisa always teased him about doing it during stressful business calls. But it was more than physical similarities. Alex shared James's love of puzzles and strategy games. When James brought a chess set for the older children, Alex mentioned that he had taught himself to play using a library book when he was 12. James remembered learning the same way, spending hours in the public library because it was warm and quiet. During one visit, Alex shared more details about his childhood. His adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, had been wonderful, but died when their car was hit by a drunk driver. Alex spoke about them with such love and gratitude that James felt both grateful they had cared for his son and heartbroken that they were gone. They never made me feel different or unwanted, Alex said as he and James organized books together. They told me that my birth parents must have loved me very much to make sure I went to a family who could take care of me properly. James's hands trembled as he placed books on shelves. Do you ever wonder about your birth parents? Alex paused in his sorting. Sometimes. Especially when I was younger and things were really hard in the foster system. I used to imagine that maybe my birth father was out there somewhere wondering about me too. What do you imagine he might be like? I don't know. I hope he's a good person. I hope that giving me up was as hard for him as losing my adoptive parents was for me. I hope he thinks about me sometimes and wonders if I turned out okay. James had to excuse himself and step into the hallway to compose himself. The pain and longing in Alex's voice was almost unbearable. All those years while James was building his empire and trying to forget his lost son, that son was growing up hoping his birth father cared about him. When James returned to the reading room, he found Maya teaching Alex a clapping game her grandmother had taught her. Alex was laughing as he tried to keep up with the complicated rhythm, and Maya was giggling at his mistakes. "Daddy, Alex is really bad at this game," Maya announced cheerfully. "I'm getting better," Alex protested, trying the clapping sequence again and failing spectacularly. James found himself laughing too, and for a moment, it felt like they were just a family playing together. The thought hit him so suddenly and powerfully that he had to sit down. That night, James lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lisa slept beside him. Every logical part of his brain told him he was seeing connections that weren't there, reading too much into coincidences. But his heart knew better. Every instinct he had as a father was telling him that Alex was his son. The question that kept him awake wasn't whether Alex was his child anymore. The question was what he was going to do about it. Would Alex want to know the truth? Would he be angry that James had given him up? Would learning about his birth father's wealth make Alex think less of the people who had raised him with so much love? And perhaps most terrifying of all, what if James was wrong and Alex wasn't his son at all? What if James was just a lonely father projecting his deepest wishes onto a kind young man who reminded him of what he had lost? But as James finally drifted off to sleep, one image stayed with him. Alex and Maya laughing together over that silly clapping game, looking like the siblings they might actually be. 2 weeks later, James got a call that changed everything. Dr. Johnson's voice was shaky when she called him that Tuesday morning. "James, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have an emergency situation. One of our long-term patients, a little boy named Kevin, took a turn for the worse last night. His family is here and, well, they're saying their goodbyes." James felt his heart sink. He had met Kevin several times, a brave 7-year-old who always asked Alex to read stories about superheroes. "Is there anything I can do?" Kevin has been asking for Alex all morning. Alex is here, of course, but the family specifically asked if you and Maya could come too. Kevin really connected with Maya during your visits, and I think it would mean a lot to his parents if you were here. James didn't hesitate. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. He picked Maya up from school early, explaining gently that their friend Kevin was very sick and needed visitors to help him feel less scared. Maya, wise beyond her 6 years, nodded solemnly and asked if they could bring Kevin his favorite book about the superhero who healed people with hugs. When they arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was different from their usual visits. Nurses spoke in whispers, and there was a heaviness in the air that even Maya seemed to sense. Dr. Johnson met them in the lobby and led them to the special care wing. "Kevin's parents want to thank you both," she explained quietly. "Your visits and the reading program have brought Kevin so much joy these past few months. Alex has been with him since early this morning." They found Alex sitting beside Kevin's bed, holding the little boy's hand and reading softly from a picture book. Kevin looked so small and fragile against the white hospital sheets, but his eyes lit up when he saw Maya walk into the room. "Maya," Kevin whispered, his voice weak but excited. "Did you bring the superhero book?" Maya nodded and carefully climbed onto a chair next to the bed. "Do you want Alex to read it to us?" "Yes, please," Kevin said. "But this time you help with the voices." James stood back, watching as Alex and Maya took turns reading different characters in the story. Alex gave the superhero a deep, brave voice, while Maya made the dragon sound friendly and funny. Kevin laughed at all the right parts, and for a few precious minutes the room felt full of joy instead of sadness. Kevin's parents stood in the corner, holding each other and crying quiet tears. James found himself thinking about how grateful he was that Maya was healthy and safe at home every night. He couldn't imagine what these parents were going through. After the story ended, Kevin asked Alex to help him sit up so he could draw a picture for Maya. Alex gently adjusted Kevin's pillows and helped support him as the little boy worked, carefully with his crayons. "I'm drawing you as a superhero," Kevin told Maya seriously. "Your superpower is making people smile." As Kevin drew, his hand got tired and Alex helped guide his fingers. James watched this tender moment, thinking about how natural Alex was with children, how he seemed to know exactly what they needed without being told. Then Kevin accidentally knocked over his cup of water, and Alex quickly reached across the bed to catch it before it could spill on Kevin's artwork. As Alex stretched his arm, his sleeve pulled back, revealing his left wrist. James's entire world stopped. There, on Alex's wrist, was a small butterfly-shaped birthmark. The exact same birthmark James had kissed 26 years ago when he held his newborn son for the only time in his life. James gripped the back of the chair he was standing behind, his knees suddenly weak. His vision blurred and his heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The birthmark was unmistakable, 3 small brown spots arranged perfectly to look like a tiny butterfly in flight. Alex didn't notice James's reaction. He was focused on helping Kevin clean up the spilled water and salvaging the drawing, but James couldn't look away from that birthmark, the one piece of proof he had been unconsciously looking for all these weeks. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Maya asked, noticing that James had gone very pale. I need some air," James managed to say, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. Alex looked up with concern. "Here, let me help you to a chair." As Alex stood up and walked toward James, James found himself studying every detail of the young man's face with new eyes. This wasn't just someone who resembled his family. This was his son. His child. The baby he had held for 1 hour and then lost forever. Alex gently guided James to a chair. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Do you need me to call a nurse?" James stared into Alex's kind green eyes, his father's eyes, his own eyes, and felt 26 years of buried grief and love and regret crash over him like a tsunami. His son was right here, had been right here for weeks, taking care of sick children and being everything James had hoped he would grow up to be. "The birthmark," James whispered, not even realizing he had spoken out loud. Alex looked down at his wrist, confused. "Oh, this? Yeah, I've had it since birth. My adoptive mom used to say it was my good luck charm, that it meant I was meant to fly." James's eyes filled with tears. Rebecca used to trace that same birthmark with her finger when she was pregnant, saying their baby was going to soar through life like a butterfly. Maya had been watching this exchange with the intense curiosity that only children possess. She looked from James to Alex, noting their similar expressions and the strange tension in the room. Then, with the startling clarity that kids sometimes have about things adults can't see, she gasped. "Daddy," Maya said loudly, her voice cutting through the quiet room like a bell. "That's my brother." The words hit James like lightning. His 6-year-old daughter, who had spent the last month playing with Alex and forming a bond that seemed to come from nowhere, had somehow recognized what James had been afraid to admit even to himself. James looked at Maya's innocent face, then at Alex's confused expression, then back at that butterfly birthmark, and something inside him completely broke apart. He collapsed into the chair, buried his face in his hands, and began to sob. 26 years of wondering, hoping, regretting, and dreaming poured out of him in tears he couldn't control. His shoulders shook as he cried for the son he had lost, for the years they had missed together, for the incredible man Alex had become without him. "Sir, what's wrong?" Alex asked urgently, kneeling beside James's chair. "Should I call security? Do you need medical attention?" But James couldn't speak. He could only cry and think about how his son, was trying to take care of him, just like Alex took care of everyone else. Maya, with the fearlessness of childhood, walked over and put her small hand on James's shoulder. "Don't cry, Daddy. I think this is happy crying." Kevin's parents and the nurses were staring in confusion, but Maya looked at Alex with complete certainty. "You're my brother," she said matter-of-factly. "I knew it from the first day we met you. You have the same eyes as my daddy." Alex looked from Maya to James, and slowly something began to dawn in his expression. Something that looked like recognition, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. The room was completely silent except for James's quiet sobs and the steady beeping of Kevin's machines. Alex knelt beside James's chair, his hand hovering uncertainly over James's shoulder, not sure whether to comfort a stranger who was clearly in pain. Maya, with the innocent wisdom that only children possess, looked directly at Alex. "Your eyes are exactly like my daddy's," she said softly. "And you laugh the same way he does. And you both do that thing where you touch your nose when you're thinking really hard." Alex stared at Maya, then at James, pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together in his mind. "Sir," he said quietly, "I think we need to talk." Dr. Johnson, sensing this was a private moment, gently ushered Kevin's parents and the nurses out of the room. Kevin, exhausted from his earlier excitement, had fallen asleep clutching his drawing. Maya sat quietly in her chair, seeming to understand that something very important was happening. James finally lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen from crying. When he looked at Alex, he saw his own face looking back at him. 26 years younger, but with the same expressions, the same mannerisms he had passed down without even knowing it. "Your birthday?" James whispered, his voice shaking. "Tell me your birthday." Alex's eyes widened. "March 15th, 1999. Why?" James closed his eyes and took a shuddering breath. "March 15th, 1999. 3:47 in the morning. You weighed 7 pounds 2 ounces. You had this tiny cry, and when you opened your eyes for the first time, you looked right at me like you knew exactly who I was." Alex sat back on his heels, staring at James in shock. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I was there," James said, tears streaming down his face again. "Because I held you for 1 hour before they took you away. Because I've thought about you every single day for 26 years. The silence that followed was deafening." Alex's face went through a dozen different emotions. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, anger, hurt, and something that might have been hope. "You're my—" Alex couldn't finish the sentence. "Your birth father," James whispered, "and I have regretted giving you up every day since then." Alex stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to James. His shoulders were tense, and James could see his hands shaking. Maya looked back and forth between them, beginning to understand that this conversation was bigger than she had realized. "Why?" Alex's voice was barely audible. "Why did you give me up?" James's heart broke at the pain in his son's voice. "Because I was 19 years old and had nothing. No money, no family, no way to take care of you. Your mother's parents. They said we were ruining your life by keeping you. They said you deserved parents who could give you everything we couldn't." "My mother," Alex said, still facing the window. "What happened to her?" "Her family sent her away after you were born. I tried to find her, but they wouldn't tell me where she went. I never saw her again." Alex turned around slowly, his green eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what it was like growing up not knowing where I came from? Do you know how many nights I lay awake wondering if my birth parents even cared that I existed?" James stood up, wanting to reach for his son but not daring to. "I cared. God, Alex, I cared so much it nearly destroyed me. I built my entire life around the hope that someday I might find you again." "You built your fortune," Alex said bitterly. "Congratulations. You proved to my mother's parents that you could make money. Too bad it was 26 years too late." The words hit James like physical blows, but he knew Alex had every right to be angry. "You're right. I was too late. But Alex, please understand. Not a day went by that I didn't think about you. Every success, every achievement, it was all hollow because you weren't there to share it. Maya, who had been listening to this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. Alex, my daddy talks about you in his sleep sometimes. Both men turned to look at her. What? James asked. You have dreams about a little boy, Maya said matter-of-factly. You wake up sad and Mom asks what's wrong, but you never tell her. But now I know. You were dreaming about Alex when he was little. Alex's angry expression softened slightly as he looked at Maya. Is that true? James nodded, unable to speak. Alex was quiet for a long moment, staring at the butterfly birthmark on his wrist. My adoptive mom used to tell me that somewhere out there, someone was thinking about me and hoping I was happy. I always thought she was just being nice. She was right, James said softly. Someone was thinking about you every single day. Alex looked up at James, and for the first time there was no anger in his eyes. Just sadness and a tentative hope. I used to imagine what you might be like. I hoped you were a good person. I hoped you thought about me sometimes. I imagined you too, James said. I hoped you were happy. I hoped you had parents who loved you. I hoped you grew up to be kind and strong and everything I couldn't give you the chance to be. The Chens were wonderful parents, Alex said quietly. They loved me completely. But when they died, those years in foster care were really hard. There were nights when I wished my birth father would somehow find me and take me home. James felt like someone was squeezing his heart. I'm so sorry, Alex. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry you went through all of that alone. Alex wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I wasn't completely alone. The volunteers at the children's hospital where my group home was connected, they made everything bearable. They're the reason I do this work now. You became everything I hoped you would be, James said. You're kind, generous, incredible with children. You took your pain and turned it into something beautiful. Maya suddenly jumped down from her chair and walked over to Alex. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around his waist in a tight hug. I'm really glad you're my brother, she said simply. Alex looked down at her and his careful composure finally cracked. He knelt down and hugged Maya back, tears running down his cheeks. I always wanted a little sister, he whispered. James watched his two children embrace and felt a piece of his soul that had been missing for 26 years finally click back into place. 3 weeks later, the DNA test results confirmed what their hearts already knew. James sat Alex down and told him everything. About Rebecca, about the painful decision to give him up, about building his company while thinking about his lost son every day. Lisa was shocked but incredibly supportive when James finally told her the truth. She welcomed Alex into their family with open arms, saying she could see the resemblance now that she knew what to look for. Alex continued his volunteer work at the hospital, but now James and Maya joined him every week. They created the largest children's reading program in the state, with Alex as the director. Watching his son work with sick children filled James with a pride deeper than any business success had ever given him. 6 months later, at the opening ceremony for the new children's wing that James had funded, Alex stood at the podium to speak about the volunteer program. Family, Alex said to the crowd, isn't just about the people who share your blood. It's about the people who choose to love you every day. Some of us are lucky enough to find both. In the audience, James sat with Lisa and Maya, watching his son speak about hope and healing and second chances. For the first time in 26 years, James's family was finally complete.